Welcome to Kevin Unscripted, and my name is Kevin. And I've got a sponsor for this episode that I'm pretty happy to have, Pavlis Trucking. And the reason I'm kind of excited and think it's kind of cool to have Pavlis Trucking as a sponsor is because I've worked with this company for quite a number of years, and enjoy working with these guys. They're a really good group of guys, and I'll give you a little bit of an overview of the company. Pavlis Trucking is based in Dawson Creek, BC. Rick Pavlis, the owner, started drilling rigs back in 1978 from high school. And then 5 years later, in 1983, when he was a driller on the drilling rigs, he bought a water truck. Now, fast forward 40 years, Pavlis Trucking has a fleet of 17 trucks that range from 45-ton pickers, tandem bed trucks, high and low boys, and winch tractors. The crew of Pavlis Trucking are longtime employees and experienced, which is a testament to Pavlis being a good place to work, and also with a thin workforce to draw from, they've managed to keep and maintain skilled, organized crews and the guys you really want. Pavlis Trucking also knows what it takes to haul in the mountains and has a yard in Tumble Ridge, BC. Pavlis Trucking not only provides reliable service, retain longtime employees, but also care and respect the amazing country, and it shows. And I got a kind of a cool story here to attest to that. Many years ago, after a large forest fire in the Wapiti OJ area, burnt through the whole mountainside. I mean, if anyone's from this area, you know how big those fires were. And the following summer, droves of mushroom pickers swarmed the area and searched for the delicacy morel mushrooms. And they set up camp. That whole area was pretty much flooded with mushroom pickers. After they vacated the area, all that was left was a huge mess and garbage and abandoned burnt vehicles. There has been efforts to clean up the garbage over the last several years, but getting those old strip burnt vehicles that were along the roadside has been a monumental task, being in the mountains. So while working in the area, Pavlis Trucking helped, along with a couple other key people, load 4 vehicles and haul them to the scrapyard. And that's been noticed by many in the local area, Tumble Ridge especially, Dawson Creek. And along with the trucking, they also provide construction services with a 36-piece Cat dozer line, 5 excavators, scrapers, and rock trucks. They also have a line of oil field rentals, which includes a pretty big inventory of 400-barrel tanks, pre-mixed tanks, flock tanks, rig mats, double enders, command centers, and more. Pavlis Trucking doesn't have a website, but they have a Facebook page, and to get a hold of them, you can reach them by cell phone at 250-719-9148. Again, that's 250-719-9148. And check them out on Facebook. I'm going to show you actually their Facebook page, some pictures here. And then you scroll down. There's a picture of them loading one of the vehicles. It looks like there's 2, 3, 4. There's 5 vehicles there that they got out of the OJ field. Just keep scrolling down. I mean, look off to the side. You can see actually a lot more photos here of some of the dozers and, loading some of the facility shacks for transport. So I think you get the gist here. Oh, there's some cool pictures of bed truck. Check them out on Facebook. And like I said, the phone number I'll give you real quick here, just in case you want to write it down, 250-719-9148. Hey everyone, welcome back to Kevin Unscripted. Glad everyone could make it, and just wanted to give a heads up on the video. First 43 minutes or so, the camera angle, just kind of shifted off to the side. Unfortunately, I didn't quite capture the whole studio. My apologies. After 43 minutes or so, I was able to adjust it, so it looks a bit more normal. Overall length's about 2 hours and 20 minutes or so. And my guest is Mike Friesen, who is an avid outdoorsman. He's a big game hunter, co-founder of the Sportsman's channel Pursue the Hunt, and host of the Hunter Apprentice Podcast. Mike's passion is to learn and share knowledge of hunting with others, while also involving his family. And without further ado, so to speak, we'll get at her. Hopefully you enjoy. Well, Mike Friesen, Pursue the Hunt. Welcome to Kevin Unscripted Studio and the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. We are now going to be kind of breaking the ice, so to speak, on, I think this is going to be the second actual video in studio.
Okay.
So I'm glad you can be a part of
my
that.
Hair.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. That is a big deal on this podcast. We have, I think, a dress code that we got to watch out for.
Hopefully I fit the attire today.
You are, definitely, especially for the topic that we're going to be dealing with as far as your involvement with Pursue the Hunt and being, I guess, the founder of that and your interest with hunting, wildlife conservation in general. And I've got a little bit of an overview of who you are for the guests, and then you can kind of let me know if I kind of captured it proper or not.
Fill your roots.
Definitely. Well, we'll start out with Mike Friesen. You're from Fort St. John.
Yep. Born and raised.
That's a rarity, isn't it?
It's getting more rare, it seems like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, obviously, there's something here that kept you in the region. Love or passion of the area of some kind.
Outdoors has something to do with that.
Maybe not today. 35 below.
Yeah. Fair.
But first light research and design program, tournament director with New Totem Archery Club, founder of Pursue the Hunt, which we're definitely going to touch on.
Yep.
And then avid outdoorsman, big game hunter. I took part of this just off of the Pursue the Hunt website.
Okay.
So for those who are actually, what I'm going to do here is throw this on a share thing so that the people who are watching can kind of see what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And with that first light, like that's, it's more of a pro staff position there. And then we give our feedback on some of the products that we use out in the field.
Oh, I see.
For that as well. Yeah.
So sponsorship and kind of attire, like gear that you would use for hunting and whatnot.
Yeah. It's a good relationship we have with them. And I mean, we wouldn't use them if it wasn't performing in the field. We put a lot of miles on. So
pressure test it, quality control.
Yeah.
So you have been in the hunting industry now for 12 years. And had the opportunity to be a part of some epic hunts and failures, both presented in great learning environments to be able to go back on and be successful.
Yeah.
Want to share your love for the hunt and all of its details, which I think is important to highlight.
Yeah.
There's a lot of nuance, I think, with that statement. And from packing for a trip, right down to packing out an animal and telling stories. You enjoy sharing those experiences through blogging and vlogging. What's a vlog? What's a vlog?
It's like a video blog.
Oh,
but I've kind of more since starting the TV show, which this is great that we're reading this because I should probably update some of this. But since starting the TV show, we do that more through our bonus content that we put up on YouTube and then through the TV show specifically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good way of capturing it, isn't it? Like the TV show. I mean, that's almost something that people want to capture through pictures and videos on vacations and just different passions, but you have the ability to do that through your show.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a rarity that I think a lot of people I think would like to have just as a way to be able to share those experiences with anybody.
That's how it started out. But we can get to the start of the show after you're done there.
So a part of hunting experience as of late have been sharing your experiences with family and daughters, and are now old enough to accompany on more local hunts. Our family is a part of the local archery club and enjoy the recreational activities and community it brings. We look forward to continuing and sharing your hunting experiences. So, I mean, it kind of touches on what we were just talking about. Let me stop sharing that. But let's kind of go with how it started then. Pursue the Hunt in particular. How did that become, I guess, something that you decided would be viable and something you can not only start, but would have the knowledge and experience to be able to actually bring enough content out to where there would be value in being able to share that with people?
Well, so it would have been the fall of 2019. My brother-in-law Travis and I, he came up from Kamloops, and we went on a mountain goat hunt that we had planning with each other for, since the previous season. And, if there's anybody out there listening that's planned a mountain trip, takes a lot of logistics and stuff and pre-scouting and stuff. But, I was pretty familiar with the general area that we wanted to go. And so we went out there, and we stayed our first night in Toad River at the lodges, and before we headed out in the morning. And when we got in there, I was just like, you know what, we should just I know we don't have any cameras or anything, but we have our phones. We should just document this hunt, have a memory, rather than just taking pictures. We had battery pack, rechargeable battery packs for our phones, so we could charge them up a couple times. And so we did, and ended up being successful on that hunt. And I believe that's one of the very first YouTube videos that's up on our YouTube channel. So if people want to go check out where we started to where we are now, that's a good scale there. But
you recorded that with just phones, though?
Yeah, just iPhones.
Wow.
And it was a blast. We went out, that was a beginning of September hunt, but we got pretty much every weather front under the sun thrown at us, and ended up being successful. Travis harvested a nice billy and packed it out, and it was just a super fun thing. And then when I got back and I got all his videos that he had in his phone, and I started putting it all together, I was like, this is kind of fun. And I like to think of myself as a pretty creative guy. I like telling stories. It's harder to get me to shut up, kind of thing. And, so I just, put that out there, and I kind of was thinking about starting a YouTube channel at that time. I had my website, I was doing some blogging, and, just some short gear review videos and stuff like that. And then I was watching, hunting TV, and I thought, you know what, that'd be kind of cool. I wonder how people get into that, what it all entails and whatever. So I started doing some digging, and one thing led to another. And I talked to the rep at Sportsman Channel Canada, and they were looking for Canadian content. Now, sorry, this is fast forward to, basically the spring of 2020. So this is probably 8 weeks into COVID. And
that's when you started this?
Yeah. I started
this is
2020.
Really recent.
Yeah. So we just finished filming our third season. Yeah, in 2022, because we filmed 2020 was our first season, 2021 was our second season. Yeah. So we're going into season 4 starting in January. And so at that time, it was kind of more of a research project more than anything, and Sportsman Channel was looking for more Canadian based content shows, and that's a whole channel ratings whatever thing that we won't get into. But I said, okay, so what do you need? What's my requirement, right? Because the channel needs a certain amount of content from a show. And so we got a really late start. So we officially signed our first contract with Sportsman Channel Canada. I believe it was late July of that year. I had no time to prep. And I'm like, okay, well, so I,
because your hunting season, so the timeline with that contract with how you're supposed to start your, the hunting, we're talking a month or two, probably 2 months then on the late end, eh?
And I like doing things like ripping it off like a Band-Aid, apparently. It's just my wife when I get irons in the fire. And so went out and found a few local sponsors in Fort St. John to help me start Show Up, which was fantastic. They're still with me today. And get this thing off the ground. Eagle Vision played a huge role in getting us going. And I said, okay, let's do it. So we contracted to Sportsman Channel because of the late start. We got away with producing a little bit less than a typical season worth of content just because we had missed the spring season. And so typically they like at least 10 to 13 episodes per season. So 13 episodes is considered a full season, and they like 10, and then they kind of like replay your other three best episodes, right? They'll replay them, right? And so trying to get 10 episodes in a fall season is extremely demanding. And so
these guys that were wanting to have these requirements set and the contract, was that pretty much all on you, and they're just taking that material and showing it on their platform, or were they sending out camera crews and like a bit of a team together to be able to allow you to focus on the actual hunt and the area, or you're doing it all on your own?
It's my monkey, my zoo.
So what did the contract outline then?
It just has parameters on your deliverables, right? So it's like, if you're gonna come on, this is what the network requires in terms of the amount of content, how long your episodes have to be, how they need to be compressed when you send them, yada yada yada.
So you're doing everything. You're doing the recording and the editing. Yep.
I mean, you're free to outsource it. It's your show, right? So if I wanted to pay an editor to take all my content and make my episodes for me, I'm free to do that. I'm free to hire as many camera people. Like it's my content. Like I can do whatever I want with it and how to gather it.
So were they
channel is
paying
just
you for it then?
No, you pay to be on TV.
So where's the upside to this a little bit on your end? Like with the contract you're entering, was them being able to kind of give you the showing ship?
Yeah, like, I mean, I think
the viewers,
I think there's a lot of misconceptions in individuals who initially want to start a hunting show, or maybe think they can. And I mean, I think anybody can. I'm not saying anybody can't, but it requires a lot of passion, because you turn your hobby that you love into a job.
Yeah, a career move.
Right. And so that you're not getting paid for. And so, I get a lot of, I'm not going to speak on behalf of any other TV hosts. I'll just speak on my own experience. But, I've gotten people, they're like, oh, it must be nice to get all your hunting stuff paid for, and, you get to do your hobby, whatever.
Yeah.
And that may be true to a point. I'm a businessman. Like I own my own local business in Fort St. John as well. I approach this from a business point of view, right? Yes, I get to hunt, but the business is not hunting or showing it on Sportsman. The business is advertisement. So you're kind of like a real estate agent. You're selling advertising. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's what drives the financial ability to produce a show, right? So in my calculation, and I'm sure every show is different, but in my calculation, let's say, if you're going on this particular hunting trip and your personal costs are $1,000 to go on that trip, you got fuel, maybe some hotels, food, gear, whatever, right? And let's say it's $1,000.
Yeah.
If you're going to produce that same hunt on TV, by my calculations, you're at least 2.5 times that cost.
I believe it. Right? I absolutely believe
and
that.
So, yeah, you could, if you're just, super financially blessed and you're able to just take that out of pocket every time, great. Yeah. I'm not. But also being a local businessman, I looked at it as an opportunity to work with other local businesses in the Peace River region, because I kind of knew that's where the majority of my partnerships were going to come from, especially starting out. You don't really have a name behind you. You're not going to go out and get those big hunting industry name sponsors right off the hop.
Yeah.
And so I look at it as, okay, there has to be mutual benefit. Like for me as a businessman, if someone approached me and say, okay, sure, like I'll sponsor you X amount. But what am I going to get out of it? Right. And that's where media kits come in. And, we have different levels of different types of advertising we do, or with or without commercial spots within the episode, or just billboard spots, etc. So that there's tiered levels of partnership.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's worked really, really well. And we try to keep So where the social media side comes in is that's where I try to push more of the local stuff, because you can kind of target your audience, right? Like some of our local sponsors, they're not really going to get any benefit of my show showing in Newfoundland, right? Because Sportsman channel is a national channel,
Yeah.
right? It's seen across the country. And so what I do for them is I go a little bit more above and beyond on my social media side when we're launching new episodes, or when they're done airing and we post them up on our YouTube. I boost the posts and target the audience more locally so that their partnership name gets seen more locally. We try to do what we can that way for our local partners. And so going back to how we started, that's a little bit on how I got started too, I guess. But going into that first year, there was a lot of things that were eye-opening to me. And I don't know if this is one of your questions or not, but the hardest part about having a hunting show is your camera operator. By far.
To be able to capture the shot, the moments that are a little bit by surprise.
It takes an extremely particular camera operator to be successful out with a hunting show. And the reason I say that is, for one, you obviously need to know how to operate a camera. Whether that be you're super creative with it or not, you need to know how to operate it. You need to know, you need to be creative with some angles, etc. It helps the editing process. But the other thing that you need to know is how to hunt. Because if you don't know how to hunt, then when I'm stalking a mule deer with my bow and you're right behind me with the camera, you have to read my body language and how to react, because you're bow hunting. You're getting up close and personal.
Yeah.
Right. And then the third thing is fitness. A camera operator, in my opinion, for the hunting that I do, needs to be as fit or more fit than I am, because you're probably doing more steps than me, because you're maybe running ahead, getting a shot coming forward, or you're laying behind and then you've got to catch up. You're working as a camera operator in a hunting scenario. You're working extra.
With what you're doing, are you dealing with just one camera operator, or are you using two?
No. So we have one camera operator at best, depending on the type of hunt. Like if I'm just, sitting in a blind, maybe hunting some whitetail or something like that nature, I can for the most part self-film that kind of stuff. Self-filming during bow hunting does not work well. Hats off to the guys like Remy Warren and a couple of those guys that like Solo Hunter that have managed to capture that and pull that off. It's incredibly difficult. And I'm sure that, if I didn't have as many irons in the fire, perhaps I'd maybe have more time to dedicate to specifically self-filming, but I don't think that's what our show's really after either. That's the hardest part about operating a camera or operating a hunting show, is your camera operator. And it's always your pinch point, because a lot of times, it's either you and a co-host that take turns operating the camera, which works pretty well for the most part. Or, you're paying a camera operator, which, you want to try to vet, and see what their hunting experience is specifically. Like for me, it's more important that the operator knows how to hunt more than how to really work a camera. You can coach that a little bit and stuff. And I'm not trying to downplay that, but if you don't know how to hunt, it's exponentially harder to be successful.
This almost sounds like something that would fall within, I guess, the realm of pursue the hunt as a whole, as far as the show and a co-host and everything that goes with it. I mean, almost instead of outsourcing a camera operator that would be that unknown, wouldn't it make more sense to, if you got a buddy that's now a co-host or a part of this journey, to be able to pick up that skill of trying to capture those moments and be the camera operator along maybe with yourself, like you touched on?
And that's definitely an ideal situation. And the next where I'm going to go with that is it takes an extreme amount of dedication, right? Because as a host and someone whose signature is on that contract, and I'm an honoring person, I know how much content, the first season I was a little bit naive. I think everybody is, to how much work it actually takes to get that content.
Yeah.
But once you get a true picture of how much content you need to make an episode, how many episodes you need to make, you go, okay, so basically from August 1st to October 31st, maybe November 30th, depending, your life is hunting, period.
It's definitely not a part-time job, a work of passion where you get to be able to bounce back and forth. It's a full-time commitment.
It is, because you have hunting seasons. You have X amount of time to get that content.
Yeah.
It's not just getting content. It's, you have an X amount of time. You have prime times within that time frame that you usually want to be after certain species because they're more active, whether it's in the rut or whatever. And so that's where your content scheduling comes hugely into play, right? Like, bow hunting mule deer, I like hitting right at the beginning of September because it's archery only, because I want to hunt elk more into the later parts of September because that's when they rut, maybe the middle of September when you're not elk hunting, you're waterfowl hunting. And so there are many times we're shooting 3-4 episodes in the same week, like content wise. And so remembering that all as a host, putting that all in the hard drive, and then rewatching those raw clips
to put it all together
to start making a story. Yeah. And I try to do that when I'm out in the field. I'm like, oh, that's going to be a really good highlight clip. And I have a bit of a photographic memory that way. And I'll pick specific memories that I'll bank, and I'll look for those in the raw footage later on when I'm editing. And that's what I start wrapping a story around, because you need to have a focal point. And particularly, like, I'll use this season as an example because it's super fresh in my brain and I've been editing like crazy. Like our waterfowl hunt that we did this year, we actually spread it out over the entire basic waterfowl season that we have here in northern BC, from September 1 to third week in October, I think, was our last time out for waterfowl. So we covered an early, mid, and late season waterfowl hunting spectrum. And then we added in the fact that my daughter had never been waterfowl hunting, so she got introduced to waterfowl hunting and how to shoot a shotgun, at a moving target, and, just things like that. And we built it as a largely as a youth educational type of episode, right? So that's what we built that around. Was the focal point was on the education of new and or youth hunting getting into waterfowl hunting.
When it comes to editing, was one of the things that you learned was to be able to categorize and build a structure, to be able to navigate through some of that material so that it was easier to have the workflow, finding the material you wanted, even though it wasn't, in order in a series. Let's say you had the focal point with your daughter, you're able to capture scenes that might have happened after maybe your end game and incorporate that as part of the storyline without kind of always having to make mental notes. Or how was your approach on putting that together in a way where you weren't wasting a lot of time looking for all that content?
Yeah, I've definitely refined the process each season. Like, so the first season was utter chaos because not only did we have such a short time frame to get all our content, I decided that our first episode was going to air the last week of that year in December, is when their first quarter started. So my season ended November 30th, and we had to have our first episode submitted to Sportsman by like December 17th. And so during the season, while we're getting content, I'm also editing content and starting to put that together. Because if you think that, and that depends if you're all doing it yourself. That was the way we chose to do it. And so it did put more pressure on me, but I didn't feel overly comfortable having someone else put my story together for me. I had a particular way in my brain that I wanted it to look. We wanted it to be very raw. Editing came in the form of, audio story clips and, color correction. We don't green screen. We don't retake shots. We don't use stock footage. Everything you see on our show is what happens out in the field as it happens.
When you said it was trial by fire, did that mean, though, that the knowledge and skill of being able to put a lot of this together, editing-wise, even capturing these, was that new to you, or did you have a bit of an understanding and background that allowed you to be able to take these shots and do the editing, especially within the timelines and the structure that you had to work within?
It was a very steep learning curve.
So you had zero background on
I had like a little bit of experience with some editing programs. I use Final Cut Pro with Apple for all my editing. That program was brand new to me that season, but I seemed to pick that stuff up honestly pretty quick in terms of knowing my way around the basics plus a little extra within the program. And I mean, obviously you learn as you go. But yeah, that was a steep learning curve. Eagle Vision had a huge hand in assisting me with a lot of that stuff, especially with color correction, audio correction and stuff. First, they did some visual graphics for us, like our logo overlay, swiping in, that kind of stuff, just to get us going and to give it that really professional, clean, smooth look versus probably something that would have been really choppy. Still might have made sense, but it wouldn't have been polished as well. So that was a very steep learning curve.
Did your contract with Sportsman require a certain standard of videography?
No. The only thing, like I said, it requires is, it had to be compressed a certain way to meet the color correction of being able to be broadcasted, the audio levels, and things like that, right? So, and like too much white, like the white balance has to be within a certain confines, because otherwise it'll be frizzy when it travels through the air.
Yeah. Like
when it on the airwaves and stuff like that. So, and that stuff was pretty easy to figure out. And once you did it once or twice, it was just the same each time.
Yep.
But every single episode is a different story. And so you're constantly creating stories. You're trying to capture footage in the field for the story that you kind of have in mind. It's like, okay, we're going to go hunt bow hunting mule deer. Right. And so, over the years, we've been refining things like shot lists in the field and stuff. It's like, okay, well, did we get an initial interview? Did we get this type of B-roll? Did we update the camera on the audience enough of what was going on? And, did
the checklist be able to set yourself up for being able to execute? Absolutely.
Right. And I mean, we have episodes where we don't kill an animal. We have plenty of them. It doesn't make it harder to create the episode, but it's definitely, it's shedding a different light on it for sure. Cause when you have a kill on camera, that's your climax, right? So the whole show is kind of building towards that moment, and there's a lot of emotion with it, etc. But when you don't have that climactic point, you have to pick something else to be that, right? Because you still have to build a story around maybe not necessarily a certain moment, but maybe a certain experience, or maybe it was just something on that hunt. You didn't end up harvesting anything, but you learned something super valuable. Okay, that's your focal point, right? And then you start building around that. So it's not harder to build. It's just different.
Build your story. You have a goal at the beginning of the season, and your story isn't really refined or built until the postseason, and you start taking scenes and building the footage and the material in around now what the end goal is. What's your story? What's the final ending of whatever? Let's say you didn't tag. Well, now what's your story? Your daughter, for an example, and you're able to now kind of restructure everything in around maybe that ending scene, so to speak.
Yeah, there's also, you have to remember that you are building something for TV. There has to be an entertainment factor.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, even if you're not tagging an animal, there has to be some entertainment factor, whether it's, you know, your buddy falling in a creek because he lost his balance, or, you know, you have to keep things moving, right? Yeah. There has to be some entertainment value there. I mean, I do that too, right? I don't watch every single hunting show out there. Some of them are just not for me. Like, we all have preferences, but there has to be some entertaining moments, whether or not you harvest an animal. Like, there has to be ways to keep things going, whether it's, you know, shooting at a deer and missing it, which I've done on camera.
Oh, really?
Eating some crow for it, whatever. But
yeah,
you know, the whole
people hackle.
Oh yeah, but you know, the thing of it is if you're not going to show what actually happens out there, you're not painting a true picture. Like, if someone turns on it, like, I always think of the person that, you know, they're watching the free preview of Sportsman Channel Canada on their television because it's not a channel maybe they subscribe to. They don't really know anything about hunting, or maybe they're brand new to hunting. What are they going to see, right? And if you're always harvesting these giant trophy animals, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but if that's all you do, that's going to paint a picture of, oh, so that's what I should expect when I go out. Yeah,
the unrealistic dynamic. And then also, even for those who are typically, I think, gravitating to shows like this too, I think the audience, they're like you and me. You know, there's an appreciation for vulnerability and the ability to be able to show those nuances that not only paint the picture of a realistic hunt that you would normally have, but then also at the same time, humanizing a little bit about how that happened, how you're dealing with it. And I think, honestly, it's painting a picture that's a little bit more realistic that people gravitate to. People are very emotional. That's why they have climactic scenes, and you have to, you know, keep them interested. You can control that with music and everything else, right? But part of that now, too, is I think the vulnerable areas, because it's not a sign of weakness. I think most people see that as a strength for the most part. You're going to get people, you know, shit talking. That's a part of what it is. But that's, I think, where the part of the appreciation of putting that in there is. Because you know that's going to be something that you're going to have a wide range of perceptions, whether people are going to make it as an angle, or maybe it's the ones that are like, okay, when I'm starting a hunt, you know, it's like trying to teach your child how to fish. You know that if they don't catch that fish the first time, there's a good chance you've lost them. But that's a part of fishing, the reality of it. So showing that in a I think a film, you know, shooting and missing. That honestly is, I think, a huge part of hunting.
Well, and when you say that too, like with my daughter Isla, she just started hunting last year, and you know, I wasn't gonna take her on like a mountain elk hunt for her first hunt, because with new hunters specifically, and that's, I think that's more the audience that we try to gravitate to, is that, you know, novice, intermediate level hunter, if you want to call it that. You know, we try to put in educational things in our show that people can take away and maybe apply themselves. But going back to Isla's first hunt is, okay, so, you know, we got lots of deer around. She drew the limited entry doe hunt for mule deer, and which was in December. And, you know, we live on some property and we've got lots of deer. So I said, okay, well, we can legally bait deer. So let's set up a bait site. We'll set up a blind, and, you know, we'll put the feed like 20 yards on the mark from the blind. And, you know, it's interesting because she wasn't overly comfortable yet with a firearm. You know, she was still learning a lot. We were out at the range.
So the age then, where
she was 10.
Okay.
Yeah. And so even though she was a good shot, she wasn't sure if she was ready to take an animal with a firearm. And I said, that's totally fine. But then she was like, but I would really love to do it with a crossbow. Oh,
really?
Okay. And, you know, I think it was just a little bit, you know, with the recoil and just things like that. It just, there is an element there that she just wasn't comfortable with yet. And that she definitely wanted to work on it. But leading up to the hunting time, it was like, okay, well, the time frame's not very long, and, you know, crossbow shoots like a firearm. but it's, doesn't have any recoil. You do have to be a lot closer, but things are a little bit more controlled for her. And so we set it all up. We had trail cameras out. We had the grain out. Does are coming every day. And so opening day came, and we sat there for hours, like 6 hours. And this was not my daughter's first hunt.
What time of year was this?
This was December 1st.
So what's the temperature like?
It was actually pretty good. I think it was like -5 or 6 that day. It was pretty nice. We had a bit of a cold snap leading up to December 1st. And like my daughter, she's been on many hunts with me. She has actually done a lot of filming for me because, like I said, person that understands hunting, that can operate a camera.
So wait a minute, just your daughter who's 10 has done a lot of filming.
Yeah, she's done a lot of camera work for me.
Shout out to your 10-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
That is pretty cool.
In season 2, and that episode is up on our YouTube channel too. We spot and stalked a mule deer, a group of bucks. I think there were 6 bucks in the group to 20 yards. And she got the whole thing on camera, me hammering the deer with my bow, the whole 9 yards.
Wow. That's crazy.
But she
especially
knew,
with everything you had just talked about.
Well, and she knew, like, we were crawling through the grass, and she knew that when I popped up, she had to pop up with that camera because it was going to be a bang bang situation. And I didn't have time to coach her through that. It was like, we talked about it a little bit while we were right before we made the stock. I said, okay, you got to be right behind me. We got to do some crawling, but when I'm ready to shoot, you're going to see me knock that arrow. And when I pop up and draw, you got to pop up with that camera. And she did exactly that. We got the whole thing on film, and that to me is going to be a memory for a really long time. It was really awesome. Absolutely. Yeah. So going back to her, so we're sitting in the blinds. It's like, I think it was just after 1 o'clock. We had been in the blind since probably 8:30. Yeah, right around 8:30, and just like not a soul. And we're just kind of hanging out, and she brought a little book along, so she's kind of reading a book, and we're kind of keeping an eye on the bait, and I was texting somebody, and I looked up and nothing there. Texting like literally 15 seconds. I look up and there's 3 does in the bait, like that fast. And so I kind of poked Isla, and I'm like, point over, and so she's like, oh, okay. And she like totally locked in. She got the crossbow up on the shooting sticks, and I carefully took the covering of the window down, and the doe kind of looked at the blind. The blind had been in there all season, so they were really used to the blind. So the one doe kind of like looked right at the blind as I took the window covering off, and we just stayed still, didn't make any noise. And then she went back to feeding. And so Isla reconfirmed her location. I said, okay, third the way up, right behind the shoulder, just put the pin on and send it. And she did exactly that. And that deer didn't even leave the frame, piled up. And then she had her adrenaline dump. And she had never experienced an adrenaline dump before.
Got
and
emotional.
She was just shaking like crazy. And she's like, Dad, I can't lift my arms. And I just laughing. Like, I was so proud of her. And it was just such a moment that I've been looking forward to. And because I remember when I tagged my first deer, and I couldn't stop shaking, adrenaline rush. And then she said, you know what, Dad? I now know why you were just harping on me all that time to practice, because she said, even though that was a 20-yard shot, that was the hardest 20-yard shot I've ever had to take with that crossbow. Because she's like, my heart was pounding, my adrenaline was going, like my arms were heavy. It was so much different than practice. But if I hadn't practiced, she's like, I probably would have missed that deer.
Yeah.
And we try to make it like, I personally don't have an experience with a camera person that's ruined a hunt, where it's like they did something and it blew out the hunt. I haven't had that experience, which is great.
And you're going into your 4th year.
Yeah, season. We're going into our 4th season. So we'll try to keep that
same person, rolling. Camera person the whole time?
No, we've had multiple camera people. but I would say the most consistent one has probably been Isla, my daughter. She's probably been the most consistent one. My other daughter, Olivia, she has started doing a little bit. She's going to be turning 10 in February, so she's going to start hunting next year, which she's really excited about. And she did a little bit of camera work for me this year. She's like a mountain goat. Like, we did all day moose hunts together this year, and we covered 15 kilometers one day for elk hunting, and she was right on my hip the whole time.
Wow.
Yeah. And we were out.
So you're talking about
days.
Physical fitness earlier, and your 10-year-old is able to keep up with some of these hunts.
Yeah. Like, not so much this year. She did have a few hunts with me. This season was just a little bit weird with the weather and how much I was going out. Like, we homeschool our kids. So, I mean, they have schoolwork to do and stuff too. They can't just always come out with me, which I would love, but it's not realistic. Some people might think I'm a little bit hard on them, but they love it.
I don't think it's hard. You're definitely exposing them to something that not many kids are able. So, you know how people think that, realize the value in sports, whether it be hockey, the time that's invested, the sacrifices that go with it, maybe with the schooling, but vacations and stuff like that, because the value in sports teaches them, values that are very hard to learn any other way. Yeah. So the same way, I believe anyway, would be with hunting, and more of a rarity for a lot of children to be able to grow up learning and realizing nuances that even a lot of adults are trying to learn, later on in life. And that's being reflected, I think, with the general perception of hunting in general, and how, the respect to wildlife and the nature and all of that it entails, because you are now giving them that sense of appreciation, work ethic, how to have, I think, self-control, even when you have those adrenaline dumps and all those little nuances that just go with an experience like that. How do you capture that any other way?
Well, so I think there's an aspect to it where I didn't start hunting till I was 18. I didn't grow up hunting, and my dad was a big hunter, and then they started having kids, and they moved from Presbyterian to town, and that kind of went away. And my dad was working, longer hours and whatever, and we just never had the opportunity. And that's no big deal. But, I didn't grow up in it, but man, like, after the first year I harvested, I was hooked.
You're sold.
How do I do this more?
Yeah.
And
do you remember the first time you actually pulled the trigger?
100%.
You put the crosshairs on there.
100%. I can.
Burned into your memory.
Like, are you asking me to tell a story?
Well, I don't. Give me one sec. I just got to pull this back, and then I would like to hear that story.
Let's do that.
And the reason I think it's important to hear that story is because there's a lot of people that are getting into hunting. And one of the things that I realized is, I don't want to tell a story, but I think an experience that I had, because I was actually a lot older than you even before I was able to tag my first animal. And the emotions, if you don't make a decision prior to pulling that trigger, I don't think, I'm sure everyone's different, but for me, I don't think I would have been able to do it, because I was so fixated on the concern where, am I placing the shot proper? And then getting to the point where it's almost like, for me, it was like I was cliff jumping. And when there's a point of like no return where you're like, okay. And that 1 millisecond of where, exactly, full send, you have to launch off that cliff hard enough to be able to clear the rocks and everything else. So that moment of commitment isn't as easy as I think a lot of people realize. And I think that's why it sticks with you.
Yeah.
And people who have never hunted or they're about to get into hunting, I think might have a little bit of that understanding, but you should take, I think, a little precaution in the foresight of knowing when that moment is, because other people, I think, react where they're just shooting at, a noise, a bush. Like, I find it wildly crazy that people are even getting injured, because when it was my first shot, I could almost pinpoint the hair on that animal, and I knew exactly where that round was supposed to go. So, for you, what was that experience like?
So after the story, remind me to tell you what I think the biggest mistake of new hunters is.
Okay. I'm writing her down.
Okay. So I got my tag, I got my core, all that good stuff. Core first, then the tag, obviously. And I was in high school, and every day after school, I grabbed the quad and I go scout. We had some land, I had permission to hunt on, etc. And I knew there was a couple of bucks in the area, but I didn't know much about scouting. I was just knew it, but I was determined to figure it out. And so I was on the quad, skirting the side of the field, and I come around this long curve on the edge of a really deep creek ravine on the field, and then I come around this long curve of trees, and this buck is literally just bedded right on the edge of the tree sleeping. And I'm like, holy crap, he's right there. And at the time, I was almost 18. I was 17 because I had to have an adult present. And so, because I was still considered a youth hunter. And so I had fading light. I ripped back to the house, which probably took me 10 minutes on the quad to get all the way back to the house. And I was ripping. And I run inside. I'm like, Dad, let's get out there. Like, let's grab the gun. Like, we got to get out there. He's sleeping right there. And so the gun that we had was a 30-30 lever action. It did have a scope on it, not iron sights, thankfully. But it's not the most optimal deer gun, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But anyways,
what's your range? You want to try and be within 50 yards?
I really want it to be like under 125.
Oh,
that's kind of where
with
I was.
Open sights?
No, with a scope.
Oh,
with
okay.
With a scope. So we get out there, and I knew enough that we had to play some of the rolling hills on the field to get within range of them, right? Because I wasn't going to sneak around that long curve. And so we're in the middle of the field. We get up over this rise, like this hill in the field, and I knew we would probably be within like 150 yards. And I remember cresting the hill, and he was standing there looking at us, like had us dead to rights. And I was like, oh crap. And I was shaking. So I had buck fever so bad. I couldn't hold myself still. And so my dad gets on his hands and knees, and he's like, use me as a gun rest.
Oh, nice.
So I got my elbows up on my dad's back. I really wish we would have filmed it, because I'm picturing in my brain, and it was so redneck. And so I had it on there.
It's so redneck.
I'm like, he's like, and he was facing us, not a broadside shot. Like, he was north-south to us, like facing us. And I was like, okay, and he was at 150 yards. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to, aim for the base of the neck, and that bullet will drop right into the brisket, right? And so, but I was shaking so bad, and then we were losing light, and I asked my dad, I'm like, well, what if he runs after I shoot him? Then all I remember my dad saying was, well, shoot him in the head. And like, I don't know if you know how small a deer's head is in the scope at 150 yards, but it's not big. And I'm like, well, and
they're not stationary.
No, and that's a small target to aim at. And I'm like, you know what? If I aim for the head and I miss him clean, right? And so I put the crosshair just above the top of his head, and all I remember, I don't even know if no, I won't say that, but I didn't shut my eyes. And I squeezed off, and the deer just stood there. And I was like, what do I do? My dad's like, shoot him again. So I rack another shell. And as I get on him, he just falls over.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, we gotta, just like freaking out. So my dad and I get down to the deer, and I was like, where did I hit him? Like, I'm looking for a bullet hole and I don't see one. And he's dead, just totally gone. And I'm like, oh, this is like, was the bangs just so loud? I scared him deaf. Like, what happened here? And so I actually hit him like just underneath the eye, and it just like totally, he was just like, he was dead standing. Wow. Is why he stood there for a half second, right? Like, he
so
just
the first round
took him out, but he just stood there because he just stiffened.
Crazy. And
then he fell over. And anyways, it was wild. But after that, so we went and got the quad, and we loaded him up on the quad and got back to the house and deboned them all. And it was just like, it was the whole process for me, though. Like, it was the process of me doing that little bit of scouting. It was the process of getting up to him and tagging him. And it was the process of deboning him and like eating what I did. Right. Like, because, you know, and when my daughter took her deer, you know, we let it hang in the cooler for a bit, and then we butchered it up, cut and wrapped it. And she was like, you know what, Dad? It does taste better when you do it yourself.
Absolutely.
And I was like, you know, I couldn't agree more. You know, she's been on so many hunts with me, and yet that was the first time it had come full circle for her, because she was the one who tagged that animal. Yeah. And it was at that moment that I realized that you can explain it to death to somebody, but they won't get it until they do it. And you know what? If it's not your thing, it's not your thing. I've taken people out where they just want to come out. They didn't want to hunt themselves, but they just want to come hunting. Right. And that was great. It was awesome. And then a great time. And I try to, like, if people aren't hunters, that's great. You know, I've even talked to some people who are against hunting, and I just always try to approach it from the light of people that are not within the hunting community or have never done it themselves. They really associate hunting with killing, and it's just not. Well, that's because I wouldn't have a TV show if it was.
No, but I guarantee you, if I think they started doing TV shows or episodes and whatnot of how they process meat in a grocery store, I think the association, it's just they don't associate that. Their experience in going to a grocery store is the moments and experiences they have in a grocery store. How do you tap on a fruit to tell if it's ripe or not? And like, what packages do you prefer? Is it extra lean from Safeway in a certain serving size? Is that your experience and knowledge that you associate meat and everything that goes with it? Or is hunting now something that, because of trying to educate people, they're envisioning someone with a rifle that's in camo, hiking and going through that, and that connection of killing, and that, you know, obviously taking a life moment that they disagree with is, you know, a moral battle. But I guarantee you, if the experience in a grocery store was shifted a little bit to where they showed a little bit more of the source of where all of that came from, then all of a sudden you start to see a little bit of a different awareness, and people would make those connections a lot easier. Like for me, I can tell you an experience when it came to chicken down in Abbotsford. You know, there's big chicken lots, and I was needing to make some cash. And so I went and I was able to get chickens one time, and you put them in these big cage, you know, on a big truck with the cages so they can go for slaughter. That whole experience of the smell and how they were treated, and you know, the games that were played in, you know, biting heads off and stomping on chickens to pop out, you know, eggs that weren't fully formed with the shells, and how that was an everyday experience changed my image in my head when I went from a grocery store and buying skinless chicken breasts, because that's what I wanted, to now I know where the source came from. A wild, I'm like, this is, holy cow, this is what's going on, right? And I think that's part of, what needs to be told a little bit more, right? And the experience in hunting, I think, makes it a little bit more, it's an awareness to the environment that I think supersedes what people's honest intentions are when they're saying they don't agree with whatever. You know what I mean?
It's interesting that you bring that aspect of it up a bit too, because if you look at, so I had my buddy Brian on my podcast a little while ago, and he was a vegan turned hunter, and his story is super cool. But the one thing he said, I had never really thought of it that way, because we were talking about, feedlots and, where you get your meat from, etc. And the one thing that he said was, I look at that and it's not where I want my food to come from. And yet, taking an animal's life, that kind of stuff, that was emotionally very tough for him. But he looks at it and goes, that animal has lived its life to the fullest and has one bad half second. When you shoot it, it's done. And you're even taking it in the environment where it's super comfortable and where it's lived its life the whole time. And if you look at the moral dilemma with either of those things, that's all of a sudden much more attractive, because he's like, yeah, that animal's lived its entire life and then has one bad second.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
And then it's honestly something I never thought of before, because I've never been on that side, like myself personally. And, I'm a meat eater, and why would I have thought of that? Because I'm not that. But hearing his story, it was just like, oh, that's such an excellent way to put it, in my opinion. And
I think it's good that people tell both sides of that perspective, though.
It's hugely important.
I think both sides almost have, the same concern with the fact that the population that we have nowadays with farming, and that the way we do, if people got more into hunting, just because of sheer numbers, it does put an added pressure that goes from ethical to maybe the pressures start to supersede maybe the viability. Yeah. And that's what both sides of the story people are concerned about. The pressures on, the wildlife, and how do hunters impact that? And I think it's now at a point where it's needed, it's sustainable, and it should be encouraged. But I'm sure as more and more people, enter into the hunting, and walking away from other sources like the grocery store, because they're looking now for the organic and the healthier options, that puts more and more strain on the wildlife, in addition to, maybe not in Canada in this area, but there are other aspects too that puts
population definitely encroaches.
Yeah.
But I think, and sticking on the topic of new hunters, I think, when you're talking about, new people getting into, like, new hunters getting into it and stuff, I think there's a very important perspective that a lot of new hunters are missing, and then I encourage any new hunter to really consider, because what I see more than anything with new hunters is pressure to succeed. They're not hunting until they kill something. And not only does it take away from the heritage of hunting, that's when you put other hunters and things in a very unsafe position. You had mentioned earlier about, like, how are people getting injured hunting, things like this, but, shooting into bushes without identifying your target. But, there are people that travel from all over the world, and even within Canada, to hunt up here in our region 7B. We have massive amounts of wildlife. We have very diverse spectrum of wildlife species. And, the inexperience of hunters, or the perception of new hunters saying, okay, I've only got 2 weeks a year of holidays, and I'm going hunting, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to kill something. Please do not come hunting. Please, stay home. Don't waste your money. I get really passionate because it really upsets me. If you can't go out there with the intent of enjoying the outdoors, seeing wildlife, perhaps having an opportunity to harvest, whatever you have a tag for. But if your sole mission for hunting is to be successful, because otherwise you'll view it as a waste of time, please, for the love of God, do not go hunting. Mm-hmm. Go enjoy the outdoors in any other way. But, growing up here, being born and raised here, being in the hunting community up here for a long time, we get a lot of travelers through this area, and just knowing the stories of people like hunters getting shot by other hunters. It's wild to me. It blows my mind that was ever a possibility. I'm not going to say that we need to wear hunter orange, but maybe, if people are just not using their common sense, like during rifle seasons specifically, bow seasons and rifle seasons, like I've hunted in other provinces as well, where, they have different regulations, like in Saskatchewan, in rifle season, if you're hunting with a rifle and if you're hunting in rifle season, it's mandatory to wear colors. Just have to. Yeah. And you know what? I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. And animals are colorblind, just FYI. Camo is great for breaking up silhouette, but at the same token as well, people in Saskatchewan are still very successful at hunting, and they're wearing colors. I'm not gonna get into that argument. I'm just saying, like,
no, they're from the division based off of movement, so not so much about
100%
colors.
100%. Wind. If you don't have the wind with you, you're probably gonna get busted anyways. That's my tip for the podcast. If you don't have the wind, don't bother. But this perspective of having to be successful and only measuring success on the harvesting of an animal is doing the hunting industry and heritage such a disservice. It's unbelievable. Like, why are we not focusing more on things like youth hunting and education, and having more programs that focus on that kind of stuff, and bringing up these young people, or even adults who are just getting into hunting, that there's maybe some courses or something like that where you can take to understand what hunting is. I mean, you should really know that hunting isn't killing. Otherwise, it would just be called killing.
Well, I think part of what you're seeing right now, and this is something that I've heard, for some people, and I think there's some truth to it, because like I said earlier, I never got into hunting myself until, I was in my mid 30s, late 30s. I'm 45 now. So my hunting experience is within the last 10 years of my life. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest drawbacks with that was that the learning curve is sharp. So you got to go with not only learning hunting, but there's a commitment to hunting with the purchase of a firearm and some of the gear that goes with it. Mm-hmm. So you do learn and fixate on that, and you learn, you look at YouTube and all of that, but there isn't the foundation to be able to learn a lot of things the way they should be. Yeah. Because the people who, like for myself and the ones that are getting into hunting, are doing a lot of that research maybe, but obviously they're not into hunting because their circle of influence isn't really knowledgeable to begin with. This is something new. Like if I had an issue with whatever it might, learning something about a computer, I probably can reach out to somebody for help and figure it out. When it comes to hunting, a lot of people who are wanting to get into it, especially later in life, don't have those contacts or those resources, because if they did, they probably would have gotten into it a lot earlier in life to begin with. And now they're getting into those situations where they're learning on the fly. They might have learned enough to be dangerous, but what happens after you tag an animal? That processing of getting it now. I mean, pulling the trigger is what we seem to fixate on. But that's the short-term part of it all. Like, how do you get it from now, the processing and field to the dinner plate? That's like a whole array of nuance that most people don't even give a lot of thought to, right?
And that's the topic that I wanted to actually come back to. Is I think the biggest mistake of new hunters is not knowing what to do after that animal's on the ground.
Yeah.
Because you know, you can go to the shooting range, you can get super proficient with your firearm, you know, down to the T, and you can buy the latest gear. You can be in the best shape to get into the area that you want to hunt. But then you watch a YouTube video on how to gut an animal.
Exactly.
And maybe that's the only resource you have, fair. But if you want to do yourself and the animal a good service, find a hunting buddy. And there's a lot bigger community, and there's a lot more people out there than people might think that will help them with that. You know,
and where would someone go? Because that's the thing.
Well, like even your local, like, go to backcountry, talk to those guys at backcountry, right? Be like, hey, like, do you know anybody that might be like have the knowledge and want to share that knowledge? Like, you have to get out there and apply yourself, right? Like, if you're afraid of getting told no, well, you might have a little tough go, but don't go ask someone for their secret hunting spot either, right? Like, be respectful. You know, the buddies that I take out hunting, I trust that I'm not going to come there next year and find that person and 18 other people, you know. And there is a trust game, and there's an honesty game to this as well, but we all had to start somewhere. Where did we get our help from? If we're not willing to pass that on, again, we're doing the hunting heritage and community a disservice, right? Whether it's passing it on to another adult or a new youth hunter, regardless, it's the knowledge of hunting that's going to carry the heritage. It's not like, no, I'm just keeping everything to myself because I don't want anybody to know what I know, because that's going to affect my ability to be successful. No, your ability to be successful or not is going to come on the basis of how well we conserve populations. It's going to come on the regulations and regulatory policies of our hunting seasons. That's going to have way more merit on your success than taking a new guy out hunting to your secret spot or not.
Well, there's, I think,
in my opinion,
something to be aware of too when it comes to the hunting community is exactly, I think, a lot of what you were talking about right now was sharing that information and the wanting to be able to protect it. So when it comes to the new hunters and wanting to make sure that they're educated properly is in everyone's best interest.
Yeah.
Now you're going to have, I think, you know, people who have those concerns, you know, of not wanting to make the effort of going with someone that they don't know because of that trust issue. And there is a lot of commitment to that. People's schedules are extremely busy, and to try and go out of your way to help someone else is an element. But one of the things that I think is a way to solve that is the interest should allow someone to be able to enter that area through the Rod and Gun Club and venues to be that would get you in contact with a group of people that would, you know, form new friendships and allow you to be able to learn all those nuances. It starts with getting your PAL or your FAC.
Yeah.
Now you're getting into contact with people that have similar interests. And then that sense of direction will eventually get you to a point of where now the hunt is going to be something that will be the result of getting involved.
Yeah.
And I think that's the connection that a lot of people have a hard time grappling with. How do you go about doing it? And when you go and invest yourself into different courses like that, I think it offsets the concern of not knowing a lot, and YouTube becomes a secondary form of information instead of your primary, because now you're getting involved with people that know things and at the very least have a similar interest.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to try to say this delicately, but
we don't have to worry about delicate here.
if you're a person that doesn't want to commit to being physically active while hunting, it also is going to do you and the community a disservice. I think ATVs and things like that are a great resource, but nothing will ever beat boots on the ground. I have harvested animals 100 yards off a quad trail, and quads are driving by me while I'm processing that animal, and they don't even know I'm there because they don't get off their bikes. You got to put boots on the ground. I mean, this last year, I probably put the most miles on my boots that I ever have in my life. But my mode of transportation I prefer is hiking, because you're able to get into spots that you can't with an ATV. I mean, you might be able to get into it with a horse, maybe, depending on how steep the terrain is. But you will miss so much animal sign in an area by not walking through it. Scrapes, rubs, tracks, trails, watering holes. You got to push bush. You got to get through it. You got to go through that thickest, nastiest stuff you can possibly think. Mm-hmm. If you think of how much pressure animals are getting from hunters, why they're not going to be on the quad trail?
No, they're definitely associating that with
zone,
exactly
right. Yeah. And so, like, you have to go where they are, not where you want them to be, which requires getting your ass off of whatever your mode of transportation was and hiking into places. I mean, it doesn't always mean you're going to be successful, but this last season for elk, we went into some new areas, and some of them were fairly pressured by other hunters, but we were going into spots where people were like, man, why put yourself through that? Man, we were seeing elk sign, like we were seeing scrapes and rubs and digs every 30, 40 yards. It was just littered, it just rank of elk. That's where you want to hunt them. You want to be in their kitchen. Well,
they're the areas that nobody else want to go, like you said.
You're like, man, if I put an animal down in here, how am I going to get it out? It's hard work.
Yeah.
But you have to be willing to put in that work, do whatever it takes. And, I really learned that last season. So last season, we went on an goat sheep hunt, and we weren't able to fly into the location we had originally planned. It got weathered out. We were losing days, and we were like, screw it, call an audible, plan B. So we came out of Watson Lake, came back down into BC, and decided to hike in. And I thought I was in pretty good pack shape. It was getting late September already. I'd put on a couple 100 miles on the boots already, whatever. But it's just not the same. Like, mountain hunting is just so different. Like, the magnitude of everything is so huge.
Yeah.
And my legs crapped out on me. We got 5 and a bit days into that hunt. No, it was on the 5th day. I'm like, we had been on goats every day. We just couldn't quite get into a shot opportunity. And I'm like, I'm staying in camp today, boys. Like, if you guys want to go out, great, but I'm done. Like, I knew I had enough in the tank to pack up camp and hike the 9K back to the truck. That's what I knew I had left in me. And it sucked. I'm not going to lie to you. It sucked, because I felt like for the first time ever, I was actually holding the other guys back. I was going to
say, yeah, that probably was a difficult decision to make.
We were in there because we were filming for our show.
Hey.
And I'm not afraid to admit that. It was a reality check.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where I was like, you know what? I'm never going to be in that position again. I'm not going to do it. And come around this season, so last year, then November, I blew my meniscus in my knee and required surgery. And with COVID still going on, wait list was a few years. And I'm like, I don't have a few years. I've got a hunting show, I've got a farm, I've got a business to run, all which require 2 working knees. And so I decided to go through the private healthcare route. Had to go through Alberta. I'm not going to get into the politics of BC healthcare, but it's pretty terrible. Good. Anyways, so yeah, I went through the Acumen Clinic in Edmonton. I went to Dawson Creek, got my MRI, went to Edmonton, had a consult with the surgeon. He was going to do my surgery the next week. This was only December. This was only a month after I injured my knee. He was like, basically like, well, I got a slot next week before Christmas. And I'm like, Well, actually, I opted out of that one because I didn't want to be post-op over Christmas, like with the kids and stuff, because I could walk pain-free. I just couldn't squat, hike, like, but he's like, okay, well, we can get you in January 7th. I'm like, that's perfect. And so, but that only gave me 16 weeks from date of surgery to when we had planned to go turkey hunting this spring. And I asked the surgeon, I said, am I going to be ready? Like, is this doable? Like, if I put in the work and you guys give me the program, am I going to be ready? Because this is my requirement. And then I said, on top of that, I've got a goat hunt coming up beginning of August. And so, like, is this all possible? And I, the requirements of the goat hunt, you're packing in 60 pounds on your back. And if you're packing out an animal, you're well over 100.
Yeah.
Is my knee going to be ready? And he says, I'll tell you what, you put in the work, you'll be ready. I'm like, okay, let's do this. So go under the knife. Coming off the drugs after surgery was probably the most horrifically painful experience I've ever had. Like, my dad had actually had this surgery a couple of years before me, and he actually told me before I went into surgery, he's like, just so you know, about 36 hours after your surgery, you're going to beg me to cut your leg off because it's going to suck, and then it'll get better from there. And I was like, okay, thanks for the heads up, Dad. And he was not wrong. Like, after those drugs and everything had worn off, I was like, oh my God, get me home. But the Acumen Clinic. It's
a very evasive surgery and procedure.
Yeah, and they were just like the whole team, right from the OR team straight through the rehabilitation team. It was an experience all on our own. We documented the whole thing. That's going to be coming out on Sportsman this next season. That's going to be airing coming up. We were able to document the whole rehabilitation process and how that led to me going on the goat hunt. It's super good. It's definitely not your typical TV series. It's a 2-part series, but it's my journey. Yeah. And that's what I want to share with people, as I want to share with people my journey. And it was emotional. It was psychological. It was physical. It was a grind. But I'll tell you what, the end of April, I was in the mountains of the Kootenays hunting turkey, and it was rough. There were definitely times where I felt I wasn't physically ready. I still had to avoid certain positions. Yeah, decline coming down off a mountain sucked.
That would,
but
a lot of pressure.
It was all healed. It just, my strength hadn't quite caught up yet. Like the way that my surgery went is they actually repaired the meniscus. They didn't take it out, which meant I couldn't weight bear for almost 8 weeks. So I actually, the end of February, beginning of March of this year, I actually had to relearn how to walk because the atrophy of my leg, the whole coordination of everything, it was just like, and it didn't come back super fast. Like, it took me a few weeks to relearn how to walk, and which concerned me because I'm like, okay, well, the time frame to this turkey hunt's getting closer, and I don't feel like I'm ready. But and I'm not trying to brag on it, but I am trying to get listeners to just understand in general what the physical requirements of hunting is. Like if you want to pull your holiday trailer out to an abandoned airstrip and hunt moose in the flats, fill your boots. That's great. Get outdoors, do some fishing in the creek, have a campfire, eat some good food.
What are you talking about? Like, what that threshold, I guess, is you're specifically talking about, like, sheep hunting? Or?
Well, I'm talking about upping your chances of success is what I'm talking about. Like, in general. So that like, if you want to be more successful, you got to put the boot miles on, in my opinion. Like, animals are going to stay where they're safe.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's not anywhere as close to people or roads or ATV trails. Sure, there's always a puncher's chance, right? Like, you can get lucky. But if you really want to experience what hunting as a whole has to offer, shut all engines off, put your pack on, and get out into the bush and see what you're if your only challenge is see what you're physically capable of. Just try to create your own trail for 10 kilometers in the bush.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
You will be physically and utterly exhausted.
Yeah.
And then do that day after day after day. And but it's awesome every time because you're out there because you want to experience what that day in nature has to offer, not filling your tag. And if you have that premise of like each day is a new day, even I've hunted this season, there were a few times like because I got drawn for moose, so in our specific management unit, I have specific areas that I hunt. And so I was hitting a lot of the same areas almost every day or every other day. But every day was still different. Either the wind direction was different, or it was cloudy, or it was sunny, or it was hot, or it was cold, or I saw lots of animals, or I didn't. Even though you go back to the same spot, it's still different every time, right? And if you have that passion and that expectation that you're going to experience something new, even in the same area, it keeps the excitement going, keeps the passion going, and it keeps reminding you why you're doing it. Because with the amount of miles that I put on this season specifically, there were times I was like, okay, why am I doing this? I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I haven't slept in a week. I'm getting up early, going to bed late, reviewing footage, on top of all the physical requirements of just being out that day. It's just like, there were times that I had to rally. I had to mentally rally. But I was like, it was that anticipation of, but tomorrow could be different. I could come around that corner and there could be a moose right there, right? It's that anticipation and that excitement of what could be.
Well, that was one of the things that
so exciting.
I was wondering about is like the moments of opportunity. I mean, they're typically by surprise, not planned, aren't they? When you're hunting,
if you're really good elk caller or really good turkey caller, you can often stage a lot of your opportunities because those animals rut really hard. Like they're really susceptible to calling and stuff where you can kind of set yourself up a little bit better for success on the fly. But my experience with mule deer is they're not susceptible to calling. I do a lot of mule deer hunting early season September because I bow hunt. And so they're not rutting. They're not chasing does at all. They're usually grouped up in bachelor groups, which means there's a lot more eyeballs. So it's just different that way. But opportunity comes from scouting, and I'm learning that each season of filming that I do is that, I do a lot of scouting so that I hope to increase my chances of success while filming. I mean, kills on camera, great. It has an entertainment factor, right? And as a hunter, you want to be successful. It doesn't mean that's why you hunt, but if your goal is to not be successful, you may want to question your goals because it's hard work, regardless as if you're successful or not. But scouting is where, there's a lot of people that miss out, whether it be you don't have permission on a lot of land or you don't have any hot spots to scout, which only comes from putting boots on the ground. Like I set up a lot of trail cameras in public areas and they never get found because they're buried in the bush. My daughter and I, we did some like mid-season whitetail scouting in a new area. We hadn't really, we'd been in the vicinity, but not this one specific pocket. I'm like, man, the way these ridges are going and the lines, like I feel like there's going to be some good stuff in there. Like, let's go look for some sign. And, it wasn't until we probably got 200 meters off of the cut line, like the survey line, and you could tell like people have been quadding it, probably about 200 meters off that line. And we had been following just a simple game trail. All of a sudden, there were rubs and scrapes, sheds.
You got into a good area.
We got into it. Yeah. And it was like, okay, we used the Hunter app. And so I pinned it on the map. I'm like, okay, I'm coming back here next year. We're going to set up some trail cams, some tree stands and stuff. And I can all but guarantee you that no one will ever find me. And I'll be 200 meters off the quad trail.
Wow.
But that's where they are. And that's where they clearly feel safe. If they're putting up scrapes and stuff, that means they're rutting and mating right there, breeding right there.
Yeah.
But that's where they feel safe because they obviously haven't been pressured there.
Yeah.
And trail cams are a great resource. You have to watch your regulations with that. But, trail cams are a great resource for that because you don't have to always go into an area to scout every week and leave your scent and pressure them, right? You can go in there, I'll set trail cams out in May and I'll come check them in July, and then probably 2 weeks before season opener. That's it. And then I pattern them off of the pictures I get, whether they're nocturnal or they're daylighting themselves, in specific areas. And that's how I'll start planning, specific hunts. And it allows me to not pressure an area so I can set it up better for success for hunting. And, but scouting takes work. I don't use wireless cameras. I have to go check them physically, especially with the new regulations, and you're not allowed to use, well, in our region, August 1st to, I believe it's December 20th. You can't use wireless cameras at all, which is during hunting season. But I leave my cameras up all season because I have to physically go and check them.
Yeah. And
it's a great resource so that you don't have to constantly.
I think a lot of people who are getting into hunting already kind of have, I think, an interest and love for outdoors. So they're already hiking and getting out, and a bit of activity that is outside. Unless I'm wrong too, I guess I just think the thought of hunting, I don't think would be so much of an attractive idea for those who are typically, their disposition is to sit at home and watch Netflix. I think people already have a little bit of a passion for outdoors, are wanting to expand it into maybe hunting. And that's where the interest starts to develop, especially if you're into this area a little bit more than, say Vancouver, Lower Mainland, right, where, for you to go hunting isn't really necessarily a day trip like we have the option of doing. It's going to be a commitment that's going to require you to go quite a bit further out.
Yeah, it's a financial investment.
Least, like a long weekend at the very least. So that's not only, I think, speaking to what you're talking about, with it being even over a season of having to check game cameras and whatnot, but the act of hunting in itself, I think, it's an obstacle that filters a lot of people out by default.
Yeah. And I mean, I even know some people that, get into hunting and, either realize it's not for them, or, it's a rude awakening of like, okay, well, I got to put in more effort than I thought. Yeah. And I love the buddy system. I mean, I don't mind solo hunting. I mean, I don't do a lot of solo hunting now because I usually at least have a camera person with me, but I like the camaraderie aspect. And, on that with, people getting into hunting, love of the outdoors. This year, I really gained a new respect for waterfowl hunting. I think it's a great segue for people who maybe are unsure about hunting or wanting to get into it, but don't know how. I think it's a great segue. And, you might say, well, how? Because that's not big game. You don't have to pack out a lot of meat or whatever, but it's such an introduction to the community of hunting because, you don't have to whisper and be quiet, right? You can talk amongst yourselves and, you're shooting birds, which, I mean, for me, no disrespect, but it doesn't feel it feels very different taking a bird than a big game in terms of taking an animal, right?
Yeah.
And so, there's that aspect. But I think introducing people first and foremost into what the hunting community feels like is more important than teaching someone how to sheep hunt right off the hop. Getting them involved in the hunting community and the laughs and the serious moments, and waterfowl can be super high action. You don't need a ton of gear. You might need a day pack to have your shells and a lunch in and stuff, and some camo, and a couple of duck calls and a shotgun, right? And so it's comparatively to big game hunting, especially if you're going to go deep into the bush or something of that nature. It's a lot less requirement, a lot less time commitment. That way, you're not going to plan. Well, you could plan multiple days, but often get together with a bunch of buddies. You go out early in the morning, set your decoys out, set your blinds up. Your hunt's over in a few hours usually because they're done flocking by that point. And you go clean your birds. You're done by lunch or just after lunchtime. It's all done. The hunt's complete. But the process of it is still very relatable to big game hunting. And, having my daughters out with me, it took a new buddy out, never been waterfowl hunting. We had a riot. It was just awesome. And I realized, I'm like, this is such a great segue into someone developing themselves into a big game hunter, like a serious big game hunter. Like there's so many relatable aspects. And so, there's still a lot of love of the outdoors. There's still a lot of, strategy and understanding, how to pattern the birds, where the wind direction is coming from, but in a much more relaxed environment. Comparatively to the big game like moose, elk, stuff like that. And, a new hunter, like, like mentally, not just physically, but mentally, like, are you prepared to pack out 100+ pounds on your back for a kilometer or two? Are you? Because I'll tell you what, like, I only first assisted a friend packing out an elk. You weren't allowed vehicles on the field. So, and he had shot it at the furthest possible distance from the pickup truck. And it was about I'm going to say it was just over 2 kilometers from where the elk was on the side of the field to the pickup truck, and just slight incline grade along the field to the pickup truck. So it was going to be heavy, slightly uphill. And we had to each make 2 trips. So we took half the elk, came back empty. So over the course, it was 10K by the time we did it, right? So 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, 2.5, right? And it was horrible.
It was to grind it out.
I've had, 60 pounds on my back, lots. But man, when you break that triple digit barrier, it is just, there's something else that you have to find inside yourself. And it was an eye opener. And then, a couple seasons later, our first season on Pursue the Hunt, we tagged out an elk buried down in the Beaten Valley. We had to pack that bull moose out, bull moose, not elk. We had to pack that bull moose out by hand all the way up the ridge back to the top. And it was about 1.25 kilometers from where the moose was to the top. And again, horrible. But at the same time, it was like you learned something about yourself. You learned that, like, because there's thoughts of like, why am I doing this? I can't do this. And it was dark. Like, we shot it in the evening, so we hiked out in the dark. We lost the trail a couple times and all this stuff, right? And so it was just like, you ask yourself, why are you doing this? But then you get everything to the top, you get it to the pickup, and you're sitting in the truck and you go, hell yeah, we just did that. Like, you learned something about your own potential that day. And I mean, I know it doesn't excite everybody.
No, but
excites me.
The harder something is when you push through it and you grind it out, when you're finished it, there's a bigger sense of accomplishment and appreciation.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, part of the experience.
And it's not that you want to do it again. Trust me, it's not like, oh man, I can't wait to do that
maybe
again.
Not, but it's primal. I mean, I think
but you know how you can do it.
You touched on the fact that you learn a lot about yourself, and that is an understatement. I mean, you do learn a lot about yourself. Those experiences are definitely not things that you're going to acquire any other way.
Yeah.
I think that's what attracts people to it to begin with, and keeps you and wanting to improve on that.
Yeah.
Like, so for Pursue the Hunt, you had touched on it a little bit earlier, but I'd like to backtrack on that as far as what exactly is Pursue the Hunt? What are you trying to capture? Why do it? Why continue? Why go through the learning curve? What's the accomplishment? Like, all of that. What is Pursue the Hunt trying to bring to the table that has got you kind of motivated to continue it on and accomplish? What is it? More knowledge, sharing the experience? What's the essence of Pursue the Hunt that you're trying to actually capture and improve on?
I like that question because, when I was even first thinking about the name Pursue the Hunt, like, for me, it is about that pursuit. For me, it is about the challenge. You're hunting an animal in its own surroundings where it's comfortable. You're in its house. right? Like you're the intruder. And that challenge, that kind of like Mission Impossible hide and seek challenge is exciting. That doesn't so much have to do with the meaning of the show, but it's where I pull from personally. I like storytelling. It's not that I felt like my stories were better than anybody else's, but I like sharing. I just personally, I love sharing. I love people. I'm a very social person, and it looked like a challenge. It looked like a challenge of like, and the memory aspect. I think whether or not I had the show, I would still film my hunts because I like looking back on them. Maybe I learned something from watching it back, or maybe I just remember the good time. And it's that passion of depicting it raw as it happens, the emotions. We don't stage motion. We don't, oh, can you go back and do that again? I want to capture it from this angle. It's like, bro, if you didn't get it, you didn't get it. Like, we're moving on. And we've modified that a little bit because, we're also learning just how to do better camera work to tell better stories. Yeah. And stuff like that. So we're modifying not the rawness, but just how we capture it. Because
do you feel you're that's what you're doing? Like in the season, you're getting into season 4 now.
Mm-hmm.
So is that mission not accomplished, but are you succeeding? I think in the vision and the purpose of why you're doing what you're doing with Pursue the Hunt.
I think so. We get a lot of positive messages on what we're doing, on maybe what someone learned from our episodes, or the fact that we incorporate youth in our episodes, or that my daughter ran camera or whatever, right? And there's such a huge family aspect of it for me. From the day my first daughter was born, I was looking forward to the day that she pulled that crossbow trigger, because I just knew how much of an experience it was going to be for both of us. And yeah, I watered up, not going to lie. Like when she took that deer and we shared that moment together, I got emotional. It was such a climactic moment for me to have my daughter to be able to come full circle, for us to be able to find a common interest to share. Like that was a huge goal as me as a parent. And, I've been asked, well, what if your kids don't want to hunt? If they don't want to hunt, they don't have to hunt. My second daughter came out with me a lot more than my older daughter, Isla, did this year. That's fine. It comes in swings, but what we all share together is, we love the outdoors, and, we live on a farm, and we love animals, in case anybody's wondering, how can you kill an animal if you love them? I do it for food source and the horns, I don't really want to get into the whole topic of trophy hunting. But in my opinion, every animal that I harvest is a trophy in its own right. I don't care how big the rack is.
Yeah.
Because it's the story. It's the story that you could share around the campfire, on podcasts. It's telling it in a way where that person can maybe live a little bit of it themselves. And, that point of view perspective, I guess you could say, we want to take you along on the hunt with us. And as far as why go on TV, I'm a businessman. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I look for new challenges that way. And for me, it just seemed like two things that I love that I could mesh together.
Yeah.
And work with local businesses as a partnership within the show, and help try to get them more business. But, also they have to believe in what I'm doing with the show as well. And I think that's an important aspect. Like, hey, if you don't agree with our philosophy, then maybe this partnership isn't going to work.
Well, it sounds like this has been something that's added value and enriched, I think, what your passion really originally started with, instead of it taken away, much like, well, you know, those people that end up having a hobby, they're really damn good at it. Let's say woodworking, just for a topic, and they get into woodworking. And now when you're using it as a form of income, it completely destroys, I think, the interest and passion you had at the very beginning. You know, there's those timelines, or there's that standard of workmanship or the price point. And I think nuances about, I think, the whole business and form of income that took away from the interest that it started with.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem like, just talking with you, that doesn't sound like it's really an aspect that has hindered, I think, why you originally got into it. If anything, it's added value and enriched, I think, the experience in why you do what you do. If am I correct in that?
I would say there were some times this season when I was freezing my ass off that thought maybe didn't cross my mind. You know, it's like, okay, like, yeah, I could be at home, warm, not out here, but I am out here.
So here's a question that I ask a lot of people that I think give themselves a lot to community or whatever it might be, because I think if you've listened to a few episodes, a lot of them have been where a lot of people have made, really, and to be honest with you, I guess I can speak for myself, I guess, with this in general. And the reason I pitched this question is, with the amount of work, payoff, and what you have to invest financially and of yourself into it, if you knew now what that would all fully entail, would you still do it all over again? Or would you maybe at the beginning, knowing what that would be like, maybe take a different approach?
I mean, there's always hindsight, I guess you could say, in terms of learning curves. Like, oh man, like I would do things differently than if I, like, now knowing what I know about camera work. But as the TV show, or like Pursue the Hunt as a whole, no, I love it. I absolutely love it. The people that I've met through the show, on the show, traveling for the show, it's been a blessing. Like it's really allowed me to see the hunting community outside of Fort St. John, because, you know, the opportunity to travel for the show is there. You know, I don't know how much international specific hunting I'll ever do. You know, I would love the opportunity to do that, but you know, our main focus around the show originally was to showcase a lot of the over-the-counter opportunity that we do have here in BC. And I met a good friend and now host on Pursue the Hunt from Saskatchewan. He actually commented on that original goat video that we put up with our iPhones. And he was like, oh man, you know, I used to guide out in that area, and this is super cool. Good job, whatever. And we struck up a conversation on our YouTube thread that turned into a phone conversation that turned into going down to his place in Regina in our first season. And he took us out waterfowl hunting, to where he actually filmed 3 episodes for us this last season.
Oh, cool. Wow.
Would have never happened without the show.
Yeah.
He's such a good guy. I mean, his wealth of hunting knowledge is crazy. You know, he's a give his shirt off his back type of guy. There are opportunities that have definitely been provided to me purely because of the show that have turned into some amazing relationships within the hunting community, experiencing new environments of hunting and provinces and what they have to offer. No, I definitely would have done it all over again. 100%.
That's good to hear. And I agree too that some of the things that you get back in return are the ones that you can't put a dollar figure on. Yeah. And that's going to be the contacts and the networking. And when networking almost sounds like business, but a lot of it has a huge overflow into personal relationships, much like what you had just described.
Yeah.
That I don't think you normally get. It's got value in itself that it's hard to replace any other way.
Well, and I think the chat, like, you're absolutely right. Like, for me, the value is in the memories. It's in being able to either rewatch it or, you know, the people that you meet along the way, but it's the memories and the relationships for me. You know, I wear my heart on my sleeve kind of guy. And I think one of the challenges going season to season is, what can we add, change, diversify to keep viewers interested? So, you know, one thing that we started focusing on more was getting more filming done in the spring season, so that it wasn't so much pressure in the fall season to get so many episodes, right? So this last spring, I think we shot we did 3 episodes this spring, so that right off the cuff takes some pressure off my plate. 3 were in Saskatchewan.
So you're able to record in advance, and so you have something in your back pocket.
That's right. Yeah. So we have 3 episodes coming out from the spring, 3 from Saskatchewan, so that's 6. So I'm already 6 out of 10, and I haven't filmed one myself yet. Right, minimum requirement. So, like, we have enough content for 14 episodes this season. We might keep a couple in the bank. We might only air 10 or 11. You know, I like to have a couple back pocket aces in case, you know, we have a really bad season and we need to pull some from the bank or re-edit footage, which I hope we never have to do, but it's been done. Because you can't predict what's going to happen out there. You know, if the weather all of a sudden just is absolute garbage, like it was this fall, it was so hot, hunting was incredibly difficult this year. So, you know, Muck dug us out of a hole big time by helping us out in Saskatchewan, getting us a record book black bear on camera, and, you know, the waterfowl and the pronghorn, which we don't have in BC. So there's some diversity of species there, right? And so now looking forward into season 4, it's like, okay, how do we keep pushing the envelope here, right? And I think that's part of the excitement for me too, is like that challenge of pushing the envelope. Okay, like, what can we add? What haven't we done? What can we redo? Like, everybody loves a good bow hunting mule deer episode and you know, stuff like that. But it's like, okay, what haven't we hunted yet? You know, so, you know, we're gonna try to hand it some links this winter.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not a fisherman. I can barely fish to save my life, but, you know, coming up in season 4, looks like my dad and I were going to go do salmon halibut, and, you know, we're going to do a fishing episode. It'll be super fun.
I'm super jealous.
Yeah,
I am. I'll just tell that right now.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that's something that him and I have been planning for 4 years, and we finally both said, you know what, screw it. Like, why haven't we done this yet? We need to go do this. And it's been super fun because even my relationship with my dad has increased exponentially. We already had a good relationship, but him coming along on some of the episodes that we've done, you know, last season we did a trip up to Beatty Lake on the horses and went fishing for Father's Day.
Oh, wow.
And so that was super fun. And we had a friend and his daughter come along. So there was 4 of us, and we fished like it was going out of style for 4 days. And it was so much fun. But, you know, getting that diversity, I'm leaving in a couple weeks to actually start. It's funny because the first time we're starting a season before we started airing our previous season. But an opportunity came up, and we're actually going to go do duck hunting in Vancouver.
Oh, cool.
Right. It's going to be wild.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to be hunting ducks with skyscrapers in the background. It's going to be an interesting experience, but, you know, it's really, a lot of people don't know about the hunting opportunities that are in the Lower Mainland, especially for waterfowl. You know, one of our partners for the show is Ducks Unlimited Canada, and which is great.
Really?
So one of their staff members is actually going to be accompanying us on the hunt in January here, and we're going to hunt out of the marshes. We are going to hunt on the fields in Delta. I have a friend who has some actual property, like farmland down there, and him and his buddies do a whole bunch of waterfowl hunting. So they're going to actually be like helping us out with that part of the show and episode. just scouting the geese for us and obtaining some permission on some land. And then we're going to try our hand at sea ducks. We're going to hunt on the ocean.
Oh, cool.
And so it's going to be...
I didn't know you could... Oh, crazy.
Yeah, sea ducks. You can hunt sea ducks. And so it's going to be an eye-opener for me. Never kind of done this, and I'm fairly novice to waterfowl hunting, which is kind of fun filming it because the audience is learning along with me. And
that's just
trying to surround myself with other experienced people that I can learn from. And it's going to be...
at least you didn't quit, because the workload is always at the beginning of anything, whether it's a career, a sport, a new dog, you got to
get the
series.
Processes going.
Yeah. And I guess there's something to be said for the Sportsman channel to, obviously see the value in having a lot of this stuff, aired and continuing on. I don't know what the contract or anything looks like, but obviously one season to the next over a period of, well, you said 2020, so you're a couple, 2-3 years into it now. Mm-hmm. That's it's a feat.
We've officially wrapped up filming 3 full seasons.
Wow.
Yeah, but one hasn't aired yet, right? So it's always a year in arrears.
When does that start to air? What is the season?
So we're airing Q2 this next year, which will be the season 3 launch, and I believe March 27th is going to be the first episode for season 3 coming out. So March 27th.
We should probably, I'd like to start kind of plugging and showing a little bit of where we can pursue the hunt and stuff.
Absolutely.
I'm going to share this.
Before we do that, was there any other questions that you had for me?
I've got a list.
Controversial questions that you want to talk about?
Oh, we could definitely get into that.
I mean,
for sure. Yeah. I mean, I've got more material here to,
we can,
I'm trying to be as respectful of the time here too, a little bit. Sure. I mean, on your schedule, but, controversial. Oh, well, let's ask that actually. Is there something to you? Is there anything controversial that you'd like to touch on that would be, something to be able to touch on?
I was kind of thinking about that on the way here. Everyone's got their own opinions about the new hunting regulations. And, I think just touching on that briefly for me was, there was aspects of it that were a little bit of a sore spot. I mean, I've relied on moose hunting to put meat in the freezer for my family. And over the last 12 years, I have only not harvested a moose one of those years. And then this year, which was the first year we got on draw. And my wife and I both got drawn. And, so instead of having 2 months of the season essentially to hunt moose, because I also bow hunted during the rut, we were confined to, a 2-week block. And, you still had to count your points, right? Spike, fork, 3 on the brow, or 10 point. Now, I've got some really good spots to hunt moose, and we got drawn for the last 2 weeks of October, which wasn't ideal. I would have preferred the last 2 weeks of September, but regardless, I glassed 9 bull moose during those 2 weeks and didn't harvest a single one of them because they weren't legal. Now, my opinions on the draw system, people can agree or disagree. I didn't agree with the draw in general. I didn't really agree with the way that it came about. But, instead of crying over spilled milk and, we have the draw now, in my opinion, and I've put some thought into this, and me being a resident of this region, I would, if it has to stay on draw, which I've never seen anything come out of draw once it's on draw, I would personally take away those 2-day blocks of general season that they put in to appease the people.
Yeah.
I would take away the general 2-day seasons in October and then at the end of November. And then, but what I would do is put it all on draw, but take away the point restriction, because you're already restricting it by putting it on draw and only handing out a certain number of tags. So let's say, let's say there's 300 tags, right? The maximum amount of moose that can get harvested then is 300, regardless of point configuration, right? But as soon as you have a general season, well, what if 1,000 people shoot a moose in one day?
Well, part of the problem that I think this is a good discussion to have, because I've got on here when it comes to hunting, and we're going with, we could talk about the bear, we could talk about the caribou, we could talk about moose in particular, because this is the first year. I never harvested a moose myself this year, and I found it frustrating because in previous years, it was depending on their region, it was typically August 15th was open. Any bull moose didn't matter. You didn't have to count all the way to the end of the month. And then after that, you had to start counting. And and I work in Chetwynd, Tumbler Ridge, that area. And that was typically the area that would allow, any bull moose from the August 15th, for those 2 weeks. And that was open for anybody. And it seemed like all of Canada descended on that tiny little area and completely the pressure. You want to talk about pressure. Look at license plates in that area for those 2 weeks. It was, so I thought maybe the approach, and this is, I guess, why I question a little bit. And I guess I have my own little bit of frustration around it, is I do think that area had to have something changed to protect the wildlife. But I thought there was a different approach that could have been done, maybe in the way of allowing buy a tag for people who are residents in this region. And that would take, I think, probably over 90% of that pressure out, and put draws for out of province or out of region to control it. And put a bit of a different approach on there, instead of saying right across the board, this is the heavy hand that we're going to deal with. And I think the approach on it with the moose, but then I think how they've dealt with every other way of being able to control it when it gets into grizzly bear or caribou and everything else, is polarizing, only because I don't honestly think the voices of people like yourself and the hunting community has been explored as much as it should have been, which would have allowed, I think, more of an approach, and the perception of it would have been softer. But it's weird how they just went the heavy hand allowed for. I don't disagree with, trying to protect the wildlife. Sure. I don't. I think we're 100%. All in agreement. I mean, I think we all do have that honest, concern. It's the way they're going about it. Yeah. That is completely, it's wrong, really.
Well, and, I had conversations with many people, and the general consensus was that before the moose even went on draw, the moose population versus the harvest rate was sustainable. It didn't need to go on draw. Okay.
That's true.
And there's some other political reasons behind why it went on draw, and we don't need to get into that specifically, but when you put something on draw, it's to typically control the population harvest in terms of either recovery of habitat or recovery of the species or something of that nature, right? I'm not a wildlife biologist, but I would assume there's some merit there. Now, that being said, and I'll go back to that, you have to look at the enforceability of a policy when you put it in place, okay? So like Alberta, for instance, I haven't hunted moose in Alberta, but, I've read their regulations stuff, and a lot of their draw moose is antlered or antlerless. There's no point restrictions because it's on draw, which means there's only a specific number of moose that can ever be harvested out of there, because there's only a specific number of tags.
Whether it's a bull or a cow.
Right. And they base that off of the numbers that they get from the wildlife biologists and counts and whatever. So, let's take our region, for instance, 7B, right? If they do a count over the region and say, okay, well, the draw for 7B for moose this year is going to be 500 tags, right? Between non-resident hunters and resident hunters, it's 500 tags. Okay. That means there can only be 500 moose harvested, regardless of point restriction. I wouldn't agree with putting a cow moose hunt in this particular region. But you know, like let's say it's bull moose, right? So if we were harvesting over 1,000 bull moose before the LEH came in, and that was sustainable, okay. Now we look at, you know, let's say it's 500, and there's no point restriction. So it'd be like hunting in that August, right, where it's any bull.
Yeah.
But you know there can be no more than 500 moose coming out of the region. Period.
Yeah.
Enforceably, I would assume it would probably be easier for the Conservation Service to enforce that, because, you know, now you're not arguing with hunters. Well, is that a point or is that not a point? Is it long enough to be whatever, right? Like things like that. It's like, okay, antlered moose, you have an antlered moose tag draw. Great. Have a nice day. Right. So there's the enforceability part on it, which I think is a really important piece that people often overlook, is when you bring in new policy, how is it going to be enforced? Right. And then the other piece is, how's it going to affect the residents in that region? It affected me because I live here. I don't travel here. I live here. And going back to your comment about, you know, if you don't live in this region, you should have to draw to hunt in this region. I don't mind that idea. Like if I wanted to go hunt bighorn sheep in Kamloops, right, then I should have to draw, right? Or if I want to hunt mule deer in Region 3 in Kamloops, I should have to draw. If you want to come hunt mule deer up here, you're going to put less pressure on the wildlife because you're going to have less hunters traveling all over the place, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. The pressure is going to be more even spread because everybody and their dog knows where Pink Mountain is. I don't care where you're from. You hear the term Pink Mountain, you're like, oh, I don't know where that is, because everybody hunts there, right? And people wonder why there's no moose left there. Well, like you were saying to Chetwynd, everybody just descends upon one spot, right? One guy kills one moose in one area and everybody ends up there.
Well, that and the restrictions, like they now have this 2 days over that are split 4 days in a season, split into 2 separate days. But you had 2 weeks there, and that where was the regulations
discourage travel.
Well, exactly.
But it give the resident hunters a piece. Well, first of all,
I'm not too sure.
But that was the thing behind it, because it's like, well, we're giving you something. But okay, first of all, if you are going to give me 2 days, give me 2 days in rut.
Yeah.
Don't give me 2 days at the end of October and then in November.
Yeah.
Like, give me 2 days in the first 2 weeks of October when they're rutting, so that it gives me a fighting chance to at least call something in. Yeah. Like that to me was that was a bullcrap cry of trying to appease the masses. Like 2 days, it will discourage people from traveling up here to hunt the general season, but it doesn't do the residents any good.
No.
Like for 2 days. I mean, unless you got a moose tied to a tree somewhere, you know? So it's like, I'm not saying there weren't people that didn't kill moose in those general days, but it was like throwing a dog a bone.
Exactly.
It wasn't actually doing anything for the residents. So, I mean, as far as it affected the show, not. I mean, I can find other things to hunt. That it sucks because moose hunts and bow hunting moose was a big part of who I am and what I do as a hunter. So that got taken away from me. So I kind of got pissed off. And I still don't fully understand the reasoning behind closing the rut down completely, because that was bow only. Like October 1st to 15th was bow only. Why they took that away, I truly don't understand, because I've never run into another bow hunter.
Well, the fact that it doesn't really have the makes sense, I think, dynamic to it is why it allows for not only that subject to go from maybe a talking point to now where all of a sudden it is polarizing, but also allows for, I think, really weird, whether they're accurate or not, I think perceptions to be generated, because if you look at that and then the overlap of like Bill C-21 and how, you know, firearms right now is being attacked, which include hunting firearms. You look at all the nuance of it, it's not hard to kind of look at it from a perspective where, well, there's a lot more going on with, I think, the ability to completely shut it down, period, whether it makes sense or not, because of control.
Well, it's so easy to tell when it's a political issue that when you get one influential naysayer, the government immediately starts backtracking. Like when Carey Price came out with that, like protect the firearms rights for hunters post, there was so much backtracking. If it was really about public safety, you would be standing firm on that.
Yeah.
And be like, I don't care who posts about what. We're standing firm on this because this is public safety. But the moment an influential person like Carey Price posts something like that, and you have immediate government backlash or like backstepping, clearly, it doesn't have to do with public safety. Clearly, it has to do with a complete misunderstanding at a political level what firearms should and shouldn't be used for, period. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, all the duck hunting semi-automatic shotguns are now on the no ban list instead of the ban list because we don't want to piss off the duck hunters. And it's like, bro, either stand firm or don't. Don't be a wet noodle. You know?
I don't think they would have that if they were more transparent in the ability to say we need input from certain governing bodies. So look at the conservation officers, look at the hunting community through rod and gun clubs and all these ways that they can generate information and feedback from people, and then develop, I think, a healthy approach as to why they want to be able to enforce or bring in new regulations and how that's going to look, instead of it just being a perception thing, the political thread that ends up just pissing everybody off.
The last time I checked, our government is supposed to be full of public servants.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the last time I checked. Yeah. And I mean, I personally feel like Bob Zimmer does an amazing job. And I have seen him out in the community. He talks to people. He gets people's opinions. He gets people's perspectives from across the board. That's, to me, the definition of a public servant. Now, when it comes to this C-21, I have yet to see a town hall meeting in a hunting community with a public servant attendant from the Liberal government, namely Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
Like getting, hey, guys, this is where we're thinking of going. What's your opinions on this? And like, are we seeing this right? Or do you guys have something else to say on it? Because we would like your opinion on this.
What you mean, though, is like in these, instead of having a shadow minister trying to voice our concerns, having the minister that's actually appointed getting involved enough to where now they're actually engaging.
Well, and I can't stand when they say we speak on behalf of Canadians.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
No, that's, yeah.
And anyways, yeah,
you wanted to get into polarizing.
I know. I was opened a can of worms.
I'm all for. I think it's needed, though. You know that I think irregardless of whether or not people have this opinion or not, it's needing to be voiced. And you're in a platform now, I think, that is able to bring, I think, more understanding. It's not that people, I think, need to change their mind, but soften that perception through a better understanding of a thing. And when we're talking about Bill C-21, or maybe the moose, we can have disagreements, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that need to be brought to light people aren't touching base on, and that's the important part of conversation. Right? It's not that we're trying to change anyone's mind, but
we need to move away from, well, you're only right if you agree with me.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to move away from the cancel culture, the bandwagon movements, and we need to be able to have conversations. And at the end of that conversation, if we don't agree on something, it's okay. But the freedom to be able to disagree or agree on something is what gives topics and discussions a fuller understanding. Because if we only dialogue with the group that we know is going to agree with us, like the government does, of course they're going to get a positive response to what they're proposing.
Yeah.
Because they're proposing it to a prepped group of people that they already know their mindset. And that is such misinformation. I don't care, like, I want our government to serve the public. And yeah, are they going to do stuff that maybe I disagree with? Sure. But if I can see the merit and the appropriate research behind that decision, I'm all in. I know I'm not right all the time. That's fine with me. But if I can't see that someone did their due diligence and just went ahead anyways, regardless of how it affected other groups of people, that's ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
That's just ignorant.
It is, yeah.
And you're supposed to be in a position of power because you wanted to make a difference. You wanted to welcome everyone's opinions. Yeah, you move forward with maybe something that, you know, we all understand we can't please everybody. But when it's always about political agenda and getting votes, that's not really in a fuller public interest anymore. You know, if we talk about C2E1 specifically, I mean, talk to the sporting shoot community, like the sport shooting community, like the clay shooters and the tactical tournament shooters and stuff like that, shoot AR platform, semi-automatic rifles and stuff like that. I'm on the other side where I go, I'm not going to get into my decision of whether I agree with concealed to carry or not. But if there was a position that the government held where it said, okay, if you want to own like a restricted firearm, let's say a handgun, okay, and you wanted to be able to take that to the range, or you wanted to be able to take it hunting, or even go as far as, let's say there was an ability to conceal carry, okay, why not have a proficiency course that individual has to pass every 2 years to be able to maintain that license?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you know what? Yeah, if you have a firearms criminal record or something like that, yeah, that option's out the window for you. Sorry. That's fine. But for a law-abiding citizen to just be proficient, people are wondering, you let your kids clean your guns? You take them out of the gun? Of course I do. I let them handle my firearms. Unloaded. I teach them the parts of the gun. I teach them where safe places are to aim the gun. I teach them so that they don't hurt other people. I educate them. We are not educating people about firearms. We're just taking them away, thinking that's going to solve the problem. I remember, okay, when I was in grade 8, I went to Upper Pine.
Yeah.
We did core. I took my hunting license as part of my curriculum in school. You know what part of the chapter was in that curriculum? Handling a firearm. We had firearms in school. We didn't have magazines or live ammunition, but the actual firearm was there. And we learned how to handle firearms correctly.
The narrative,
we have lost so much part of our society.
We have, but their intentions are because they want to, it's with the best interest of the public, because there's a lot of public shootings and whatnot. And that's an area that I strongly disagree with, because it's easier to control people who are law-abiding citizens than it is to the ones that end up, obviously operating outside of those boundaries. And so to take all of the known firearms by law-abiding citizens, whether it be the hunting community or the sports shooters or just anybody who's gone through the process and effort to get the PAL and acquire a firearm through the legal system, I don't think are the ones that are the issue. I think the issue is coming from the firearms and obviously the activities of people who normally work outside of the confinements of what is considered to be a healthy, respectable citizen.
Yeah.
That's what we need to focus on. And the reason why I think there's conspiracy theories about this being a little bit more than what the real intentions are is because the inconsistencies with how the government is approaching it. The catch and release are like all those nuances that kind of, I think, are encompassing why Bill C-21 is something that is a polarizing subject.
Well, and I wanted to bring up this one thing before we wrap up here is and one thing I just feel personally is why are we not controlling the first person shooter games?
Yeah.
I just, there is no sense of reality. There are no consequences. You look at Grand Theft Auto. Yeah. You just go on killing sprees.
Yeah.
And then if you die, you just respawn.
Oh, it's a really good point to be making, for sure.
We control substances like liquor and cigarettes to a point, and all this stuff, but we don't control video games. And, and now you've got this AI like this, or, virtual reality goggles and stuff that even make it more real. And you can go and kill someone on a sidewalk or run over them with your car or whatever. And it's like, oh, haha, did you see the way that guy flipped through the air ball? There's no consequences. There's no sense of reality. I will not let my kids play them. I won't, because it does not bring up the rights and with the way our upcoming generations, and I see, video games just in general on the rise, and, there's no control of them. They say mature audiences and things like that, but there's no control on the sale. There's no enforcement on whether or not you're old enough to understand that this is not reality. And I am not going to say that video games associated to any mass shooting, not going to go there. That's tragic. But it won't help. If you are allowing kids to have a false sense of reality with firearms on a first-person shooter game, and let's say they come across a firearm in someone's house, and they find ammunition, you certainly know how to load it because a video game shows you that, and you end up shooting somebody, and they die, and you're waiting for them to respawn, and they're dead. And for a kid to have to go through something like that, unintentionally, of course, hopefully, but they don't have that ability to process. They're not mature enough. And we give credit to kids too often that they're perhaps more mature than we think they are, or just not care. It's like, oh, it's just a video game. No, you're imprinting. You're imprinting a false sense of reality.
Desensitizing.
And I wanted to put that in there because I just think that, along with the C-21, you're going to ban handguns. You better ban the use of them in freaking video games then, because I'm not saying there's a direct correlation, but there could be an indirect correlation to just a false sense of reality and just that lack of consequence.
So, we should wrap it up, but I do have one more question when it comes to what do we do now about that? We talked about, what we had just talked about, but for a lot of those people that are, wanting to be able to be a part of addressing this and make proper change, what do you think can be done? For the ones who are really worked up right now and wanting to be a part of positive change and get involved, where, how, like what is the moving forward?
If you're against firearms because you're simply uneducated, educate yourself. Give yourself an educated opinion on it. Because, you get a lot of rally cries from people that literally have never touched a firearm in their entire life, but they're against them because they kill people. No, firearms have never killed anybody in their life. It's the person pulling the trigger. I'm sorry, but a weapon does not operate itself. Someone has to operate it. And so educate yourself. I don't care if you're still against them afterwards. Take a firearm safety course. Put yourself through it. And if you still feel the same way, hey, you know what? I can respect that then. But educate yourself. For those of us who already hunt and respect firearms, understand the consequences, etc., support your local rod and gun clubs, because they have a good voice with the government. They often have spokespeople that are a part of other organizations like the BC Wildlife Federation, or, they have influence there. So if you're part of that, you can be educated through that. You can voice your opinion so that they can take that opinion to higher places. Yeah. I've honestly really never felt that signing petitions has had a huge impact. I do it anyways, but I don't know how much impact they have versus someone in your face, giving that opinion. But I think it's just a huge miscommunication and uneducation. Do I think it's intentional by the government? Maybe, maybe not. But there's lots of opportunity to become educated by firearms instructors, taking a firearms safety course to understand the safety and the consequences of firearms. Go to the shooting range. If you've never shot a gun before, it's It's like if you never tried ice cream.
Yeah.
What if it's your favorite? Maybe you were against firearms. You go out to the range and someone lets you shoot their handgun at the steel target. Plink, 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 plink. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is actually the coolest thing ever. Right? You don't know till you don't try. If your opinion's unchanged after that, I can respect that. I don't respect uneducated opinions. And I'm always trying to educate myself. I'm not saying I'm the most educated person either, but I try to educate the best thing I can. And yeah,
no, as well said.
The biggest thing is education, in my opinion, because that's what's lacking.
Education, and like what you actually kind of were, I don't know if, I don't want to say alluding to, but I think touching on was getting involved. You know, that's part of the educating.
Yep.
And that goes right across the board. I think anybody who wants change needs to get involved in a positive way, however that looks, whether it's through Rod and Gun Club. You touched earlier too with, you know, Bob Zimmer, you know, doing a good job, or at least trying to, you know, check.
He's trying to be a voice.
So I don't know if there's ways of being able to support that, because I do find a lot of the times the overlap with disdain for government stops people from wanting to make any kind of positive engagement, whether it's through voting or whatever. But at the end of the day, the people who are trying to make the changes, you know, whether you agree with Bob Zimmer or not,
make the change.
He is trying to make, I think, the change. And so figuring out ways of being able to be a little more positively involved in some of that, I think probably has a lot of value. And that could be, you know, in whatever form. Joining Rod and Gun Club's kind of a big one, I think, because that's the first stop, I think, to a lot of different avenues that you can start pursuing. They're an area that I think has the ability to have access to resources that would allow you to figure out exactly where you would feel you've got the best ability for getting involved in. Right? The Rod and Gun Club's kind of and what you touched on earlier too, backcountry in Fort St. John, you know, Corleans and Dawson Creek, those are two even Chetwynd has a sporting shop. I can't remember the name.
But like, you might even just meet people there. Right. And like, that's the other thing is people who maybe disagree with firearms or hunting, they just don't understand the community because that's not their place. That's okay. But why do you have to come after something we like just because you don't like it? Like, why are you allowed to have your opinion? And why am I not allowed to have mine? And we can all get along. You know,
that's that. I hate those words. I'll use it, but it drives me batshit crazy. But you know, the cancel culture, these terms, I hate them, but there's, you know what I mean?
It's bandwagons and there's a lot of political drive behind them, but anyways.
So let's talk about, real quick, Pursue the Hunt website. Let's bring that on because the Sportsman channel is one.
Sportsman channel Canada. So that's our like main, obviously our TV platform. Once we air our episodes on Sportsman fully, then we transition them to YouTube. And then we're also we do some gear reviews and educational stuff on our YouTube channel as well at Pursue the Hunt. And then, you know, social media, Instagram, Facebook, just for, you know, infield updates and what's going on there. But that's about it.
I want to Pursue the Hunt.
And then we do.
I think it was sharing the whole
time. Is it okay if I mention my podcast on your podcast?
I encourage it. I do. Yeah. Where do we find that?
Our podcast is actually not Pursue the Hunt. It's titled The Hunter Apprentice. And I took a little bit of a different approach with the podcast because I wanted to make it really educational and geared towards new hunters. So hence The Apprentice. And, you know, and it's also, the title comes from that we're always learning. And we should always be learning and be open to learning and not be a hunting know-it-all, that there's someone out there with more experience in all aspects of hunting and we can learn.
What was the name of that again?
The Hunter Apprentice.
Hunter Apprentice.
The Hunter Apprentice. Yeah. And we're on Apple, Spotify, and all the major.
Is that video
platforms.
Or audio?
Audio. We are talking about filming our podcast, but I actually just got our own studio set up there last week. So yeah, we'll probably start doing some video content with that as well.
And Pursue the Hunt is on, where do we find that? YouTube only, or I think you have it all streaming on your. Yeah,
it's all on our website, but pursuethehunt.com there. But yeah, like as far as podcasts, like Apple, Spotify, and then streaming, YouTube, and then Sportsman Channel Canada.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad you came on. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And
it's been long overdue.
Yeah. Well, there's always another one maybe in the summer. I know your schedule is hectic, but I mean, doors always open, right? I mean, at this year, the next.
Best. Middle of summer, like June, July, beginning of August. It's usually my downtime. As we try to diversify, I've been looking at opportunities to more or less hunt year round. It's just less pressure on me in the fall to put on so many miles in such a short time frame. And
I don't know how you do it with running a business.
My family is very patient. I have a very patient wife, but you know what? She's such an encouragement because she sees how passionate I am about it. She's come hunting. She shot her deer on the show this year. That'll be coming out this season. And that was a super fun story. But she sees how much I love it, and she just encourages me in that. So, without my better half there, it definitely wouldn't be possible because, we have 4 kids and, they come out with me. But it's still a lot of work.
How old are you?
I will be 37 in February.
You've got 4 kids.
One on the way.
Damn. 5.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's a full house, but
Congrats.
What? Thank you.
By the way, that's pretty cool.
I love it. I love being a dad. It's the most rewarding thing ever. I get to take them out. I get to teach them stuff. They get to teach me stuff.
Yeah.
And you'll be seeing a lot more of my kids on coming seasons because I'm not doing it without them.
Your youngest is on the way and your oldest is 10?
Just turned 12.
Yeah. Is that, I wrote her name down there.
Isla?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So Isla, and then Olivia, and then Nathan, and then Matthew. So this 5th one will be a tiebreaker because we have 2 girls and 2 boys.
Shout out to the Friesen family.
Yeah, we got our own hockey team now.
Wrecking crew, or a hunting show.
Yeah,
just as good.
It's gonna be the next. I can't wait for the next 5 years. It's gonna be a riot. More of my kids are gonna start hunting. Like my 6-year-old son, he's just he's just itching. He comes out, but he's just a little bit young to do the overnight trip, day trip type of stuff yet. Just with the miles that we put on. But I took him out deer hunting a couple of times, waterfowl a couple times, and
there's a camera crew. Arm him with GoPros and freaking cameras.
I know, and so it's just super fun.
Right on. Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks for coming on again.
Absolutely.
And looking forward to checking out some of your material, especially in the upcoming season.
You bet.
I'll be following you.
Awesome.
And you take care.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You bet. I need an outro lingo. There you go.
This is my jingle.